Welcome, author, book marketer, and host of the Financially Free Author Podcast, Carolyn Choate. Yay! I'm so excited to have you on the podcast because I've been following your YouTube channel, like talking all about sales funnels and things like that. But in case listeners don't know, can you tell them a little bit about yourself and your writing?
Yeah, I would love to. This podcast is just such a dream for me because even though I have been working in sales funnels and digital marketing, I'm starting to bring it back to books, which is where I started from and my first love. And, I was going to be a novelist. I was like 12 years old. I got to know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I got to get it all planned out and sorted. I'm going to write romance novels. And I really dedicated myself to that for years and years. But I was such a slow writer, and Kindle didn't come out until after I had already kind of thought this was a mistake. I can't make a living doing this. So now I'm coming back around to it. Like the opportunities for authors now is just amazing. With the internet, you can connect to any kind of group. And my funny little romance novel about a disabled hero found an audience because, like, you can find anybody online. So, yeah, I had been doing sales funnels until, well, I mean, I'm still doing sales funnels, but a publisher friend that I was networking with came to me and said, I throw these great launches for my authors. And then after it's over and the dust settles, they have no idea what to do with their books next. And they really need to understand funnels. I was like, you're right. We don't talk about what happens after the launch. I need to do something about that. And that's exactly what I did. So now I'm like, yes, sales funnels for books, what author websites, like here's how you keep those sales going. And I have such a good example of it myself because that romance novel that I first published in 2009 is still selling completely passively by itself because of the principles of search engine optimization and funnels. And, if I promoted it, it would do even better, but it still makes at least 2 or 3 sales a month, 13 years later.
See, and that's such a great example. Oh my gosh. And I love that you were, man, you were right there near that Kindle boom. Like you were right near it. Like right, like yeah. And that's so great that you were able to you've kind of kept the longevity of it, which is awesome. And plus, like you said, anyone nowadays, I see so many romance authors who like niche down and they can find success by niching down into certain areas of romance, right?
Because readers are voracious. If you find even a niche as small as 50 people, they're going to buy every book you write. So,
Like I absolutely love all the information that you provide on your YouTube channel, like about, like you said, the sales funnels. And now we got a book launch planner coming up. And since I work in the retail space, it is so enlightening to see someone who has both a background in the business side of publishing and a creative mindset. Like you really like honed into my sweet spot because I have like such a background in merchandising for the business part of it, but I am creative too. Like I do want to, I'm a writer and I love romance and I love all the creative stuff. So what led you to focus on sales funnel and marketing for authors specifically?
I think we think of them as such separate worlds, and yet when you can bring your creative brain to marketing, it explodes. Like there's so much great opportunity to be creative in marketing and to think outside the box and try new things. I never would have thought that I would like marketing because I was like I said, growing up, I'm going to be a novelist. My dad's a scientist. My mom's a scientist. My brother's in IT. None of us are entrepreneurs. None of us are business people. So to me, it was always like, oh, yeah, marketers are evil. Like, you don't want to be that person. So it was a lot of mindset had to shift for me to realize that marketing is like storytelling, and it's like taking someone by the hand and helping them connect with the things that they want. Because, like, I have trouble finding the kinds of books that I like to read because it's a small niche. Having someone who can help guide you and say, oh, here's where you can find these kind of books, like, that's amazing. That's wonderful. That's not evil.
it's not, I think, as difficult as people tend to think it is. Like I know I've done like marketing classes like for at author conferences and
Mhm.
trying to break it down in easy like step by step stuff, but people are just like, but it's so daunting. And I think that's the thing. If you break it down like in bite-sized chunks, I think it's a lot easier. And I love how you frame it as a storytelling, because that's really essentially what it is. You're telling people why they would be interested in your book or your products or you as an author and what that story is.
You don't have to overthink it. You don't have to suddenly turn yourself into a robot. Like, let your enthusiasm sell you. What you said about the overwhelm, for sure. I think that was a big motivation for me in creating the book launch planner, because when people go and Google, like, okay, how do I launch a book as an indie author? It's like mountain of information floods over you. And those are two mixed metaphors. Don't listen to me. But there's just like, you don't know where to start. You don't know what to do first. You don't know which things are important, which things are optional, which things to pay for. It's really overwhelming. And I thought, why isn't there a resource that is like, okay, day one, do this. Day two, do this. Here's how you do this.
And the moment you had a book, I saw you had a book launch planner. I was like, I knew we had to like discuss, because I was just like so excited, because I think you have a very interesting view of it by taking it as a planner, right? As opposed to all that, like you said, all that information coming to it on all sides. Do this, do that, do this, do that. And instead you have it kind of in a succinct, easy, easy place so people can jot down their ideas and like have a structure to it.
Exactly. You can put in your own notes. You can cross out what you want to, circle what you want to, put it all into your calendar. So it's not just I'm reading a book about book launching and I'm so overwhelmed. It's like very, very guided.
Oh my gosh, which is like, I think makes it easier for someone when you, like, and even me, like, that makes it so much easier to me when I knew, like, okay, here's a step by step guide. I just have to get this one step. Then I can get the
Mhm.
next step and then the next step. And
Yeah,
so
and another big motivation is I wanted it for myself.
absolutely. Like I plan on like guys, I'm totally gonna buy this and purchase it so I can support Carolyn and her like planner dreams. Cause that is, I love this idea and I would love to utilize it, right? Because that's something I utilize actually in my day-to-day. Real quickly about me, like I have a background in working with video games. And like as someone who works in the video game industry, games live or die by their launches. I mean, that's just the bare bone facts. And while books have a longer lifespan than games, it's easy to throw together in like an immediate book launch. I've heard of a lot of authors who do that. They're like, well, my readers want something now. So they just throw it out with very little fanfare, very little announcement, and just say that, okay, it's done. And then what is one of the biggest missed opportunities for authors when planning their book launch that you found?
Yeah, it's so tempting to do that. And I won't say that I haven't done that, because, you spent so much time with these characters and you love them so much. And you're like, I want the world to meet them now. I don't want to
Mm.
wait 3 or 4 months. I want them to meet them now. So it's very tempting to skip ahead and just put the book out as quickly as possible. But when you do some planning around it, you have, especially, I think, like you said, the biggest missed opportunity is probably the podcasts. Podcasts are like taking yourself on a book tour. It's the new way of doing a book tour, and they schedule months in advance. So if you can plan it right, then you're researching podcasts that have the same audience who's going to love your book. You're reaching out and saying to the host, here's why your audience might love my book, and this is when it's launching, and I hope that maybe we can coordinate. And that way you get a whole bunch of these podcast interviews that are dropping right at the launch, build up some of that momentum. But you gotta plan that a few months in advance.
Well, and I'm so thrilled that you actually mentioned that it's kind of like the new book tour, because that's something actually I asked recently. My friend, like it wasn't on the podcast specifically, but one of my friends had launched a book earlier this year, and she was like, "Well, I'm going on like a blog tour," and I'm just like, "Do they still do those?" Like
Yeah,
I was
that's the thought I had too when I was researching for the planner. I was like, blog tours were all the rage in 2010. Are we still doing
exactly.
that?
Exactly. And I remember it being like a big deal back in like, yeah, like you said, like 2014, 2015. I remember like that was all the rage. And then you had like just a laundry list of all these blog tours you were doing as an author. But now I rarely see that anymore. What I see, and like you mentioned, is podcasts. And it's and I kind of ran through my numbers with you, and I'm really willing to share them with anybody. They just kind of vary depending on, where I am in the podcast at any given time, because I've grown over like the last 2 years pretty significantly. But you can get a lot of impressions from just doing one podcast, like what, anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes of your time.
And you get to really show off your personality and connect with people on a whole different level. It really shines. I mean, if you're posting on someone's blog, your tone, your writing, it's probably not that different from the owner of the blog. You have your own writing style, so it's a little bit different, but it doesn't connect as strongly with those potential readers because they might not even notice that they're reading a guest post. Whereas with podcasts, they get to hear your voice, your tone. You can show off the passion that you have for this project. And it just makes people feel much more deeply connected to you when there's that voice element.
Oh, absolutely. And something I've always mentioned most of the time to a lot of my authors in particular, this is evergreen content. My audience, I still get new listeners who are going all the way back in my archives and finding things from a year and a half ago from an interview, right? And it may not
I
be
have
a
to
new
tell
book,
you.
but it's a new to them book, right?
Yes, and like you said, with video games, there's that shelf life, and books used to
Mhm.
have that. Before the internet, it was, you have this period of time, and if you don't sell off those bookstore shelves, you're done. But it's not like that anymore. Now with the internet, it is evergreen. And so you can relaunch your book anytime you want. You can start putting promotional stuff out about it 15 years later, like I do. But my favorite story about the power of podcasts is that I started listening to a digital marketing podcast, and it was two ladies talking, and I loved their personality. I felt so comfortable. It was like just sitting in a living room with them talking about marketing, which is one of my favorite topics now. So when they announced that they had a course coming out, I bought it immediately. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't like reach out. I just bought it. And it turned out that I was listening to a podcast that had stopped airing 5 years before.
Oh,
And I had
wow.
no idea. So the course was a ghost town. It was no longer supported, and I had to go and find them so I could get a refund.
Like you found it 5 years later. At that point, it was defunct. Did you ever find a course for them? Did they ever offer any kind of other course or anything?
I don't know, actually. After that, I felt a little let down.
Oh,
I felt a little tricked that I'd been listening to something so old, which was not their fault at all. But podcasts are funny because it's really hard to see what date it dropped on. Like, it doesn't really display that the way it does on a blog where you're like, oh, okay, this blog came out on this date. But podcasts are a little bit more, yeah, here's one you can listen to, and you don't necessarily see what date it is. So it was not their fault, but it soured me on them a little bit.
ah, that's why I kind of mentioned, though, I guess it's a pro and a con. It can be evergreen content.
But the pro thing is, they were selling something that they had to upkeep, but you're selling a book. It's on Amazon. So if somebody finds your podcast interview 5, 10 years later and they go to buy your book, it's there and they buy it and they become your fan and it's great.
And I usually try to link mostly to author pages to help the author. So that way they can find, because if they have new books, then they can find that new book in particular, right? I try to do both the author page and the book in particular's product page. That way they can find them any one way or another, right?
Yes.
So it's very easy. And I do mention authors all the time, since I do come from a marketing background, that they could use the podcast as like content for their newsletter, right? Or they
Mhm.
can put it out to other people. They can say like, hey, don't forget to check out this podcast, because you can not only reach new fans, but give additional content to existing fans.
And one of the ideas that I put in the planner was if you organize and schedule a bunch of podcasts that are all going to go live the week of your launch, put a schedule on your webpage that's like, here's where I'll be on this day, here's where I'll be on this day, with links to all these different podcasts. That's fun. More like a tour.
Like I know I sit in a very different realm. Like I love to talk about storytelling and story structure. But as someone else may just want to geek out about your characters, right? And like your writing journey. And I usually talk a little bit about the writing journey too. But like every podcast is going to have their own flavor and they're going to bring something different. You're going to learn something different from each author that you listen to. Like you have the same author, different podcast. You're going to learn something different every time that they're on the podcast.
Yeah.
In your book launch planner, there are chapters broken out into a 3-month plan. You kind of mentioned that. And
Mhm.
do you consider 3-month plan a recommendation or a minimum for planning?
It's a minimum. Yeah.
Okay.
There's definitely, one of the reasons why traditional publishing takes as long as it does is they're going to put together a launch plan that spans a year. Yeah, you got to give it 3 months if you want a decent launch. But it really depends on your goals too. So that's also in the planner. Like, is your goal for this launch to like blow it out of the water and have the biggest launch you've ever had? Or is it you're rapid releasing? This is the third in a series, and maybe you want to do a few of the ideas, but you don't need it to be epic. So you can pick and choose the pieces that you want depending on what your goal is for that launch. And there's also some advice about how to set those goals and how to be realistic with what kind of income this launch might bring in, how many downloads you might expect to get, and things like that too.
I like how you differentiate too between is this like one you want to really take your time with, like one you really want to blow out of the water, or if it's like one in a series that you have, that you really just want to kind of get out there and make an impact quickly, as
Mhm.
opposed to something you want to take your time with. I know for like bigger launches, they will tell us a minimum of 4 months, usually for any kind of marketing stuff. The goal there, let me put that way. That's the goal that they give as far as like, okay, we want to at least give ourselves 4 months to figure this out so we can hit all our marketing beats, right? And you did make a point I just totally skipped over and I just remembered now that you mentioned publishers and publishers are utilizing podcasts so much more now, like more than ever before. Like, I mean, within the last 4 months, I've gotten so many requests from publishers. And I just got one the other day from Simon and Schuster for like a release in October. And
Mm.
it is May when we were recording this.
Got to make
So
sure because they're sending out so many of those requests and you've got to track them and figure out when do I need to follow up and who have I already talked to and who can fit me into this schedule. And there's a lot of moving pieces to it, which when you're an indie author, you're like, okay, I'm the entire marketing department. So that's again where the planner should help you to get organized with that machine and kind of get some support in the form of a book and not a marketing team.
and I feel like people can do this on their own. I feel like sometimes they feel like they need a marketing team, but you can absolutely do it on your own, especially with a planner that can help you figure out where you want to lean in and do those specific beats and what you want to do. Now, do you recommend or do you mention, I didn't see it in the planner, but I might have missed it. Do you recommend doing something around announce of pre-orders? Because I know
I
that's a
don't
big thing in the gaming industry, but I don't know how it is so much with the books. I haven't seen a lot of things, but I'm curious your opinion.
I don't do pre-orders for my own books, and so I really didn't put
Oh,
much in there about pre-orders. The reason for that for me is that, I'm very Amazon focused, so I'm gonna speak about KDP and Amazon.
mm,
It used to be that the pre-orders would all hit on the launch day. So you'd be building up these sales of the pre-orders, and then the day the book goes live, all of that counts as sales and you get a big boost. You go up in the rankings, you get all this attention. Amazon stopped doing that because they realized that it's a little too easy to game that system. So now the pre-order, each one of those counts as a sale on the day somebody puts in the pre-order, which means that you don't get that nice big bump on launch day. I don't know. There's different theories of it and different things about how to use it, and I do have some resources that go along with the planner, and one of them is a small ebook from a mentor of mine who does do pre-launches. So you can certainly look at other people's theories about it, but to me, I want to see a big bump in sales launch week, and that no longer happens with the pre-orders because all of your audience will have already bought the pre-orders and you're going to be on an uphill battle trying to get sales launch day.
Well, and that makes sense because yeah, Amazon might think, you're trying to game the system, which you're not. It's just kind of, I know
People
pre-orders can be
can.
standard. Yeah, I know.
So, like, I was publishing in 2009 when Kindle first came out. Like we said earlier, I kind of missed it at first, but I did get my book up on there, and I was on the Kindle forums and we were trying all kinds of stuff, and it was a crazy wild ride. And I was there with like Joanna Penn and Hugh Howey and David Grogan. I listened to him say his name and I'm like, I'm gonna remember it this time now. So, like they were my peers at one time and I stepped away and they didn't. So now they're like household names. But every time, you find some way that's really working well, then the like scammers figure it out, they start using it. Then Amazon is like, okay, we got to close that and change things. It's the same way as with like Google. If you do a blog and
Mm.
you're doing really well getting traffic in one way, and then the scammers see, oh, that's a good way to do it, I'm going to do that too, and then Google's like, all right, how can we squash that? And so you have to always keep on adapting, and it's not a bad thing. It's like for the benefit of the consumers and the readers, like it benefits them, even though it is frustrating. But there's always these some black hat people who are going to figure out how to be sneaky with things, and Amazon is always trying to find ways to circumvent them.
Something I know that, a lot of people face, especially when like one bad apple can like spoil the bunch,
Mhm.
So like they always then take away something. So, but that's great to consider if you want to put up your book for pre-order and something you want to think about, especially if you're going, because you really can't get away from Amazon nowadays, right? Unless you
Yeah.
have an established audience, it's very hard to do that. Yeah.
And I don't have very much in the planner about going wide. There is one page that's about the concept of, if you don't have to just use Amazon, you can put it in other places. But Amazon has been making things juicier and juicier to be exclusive with them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's things like Kindle Select, Kindle Unlimited. Like there's all these like special things and perks that you can get if you're exclusively selling your book only with Amazon. And especially if you're someone like me who's like, I'm going to do the lazy marketing so that I can get back to the writing. I'm just going to play into Amazon's hand and do that. I don't feel like figuring out how to go onto Barnes and Noble and Ingram Spark and get into bookstores, but those things are things that you can do if that's a priority for you and that's something that you want.
And I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I know the exclusivity portion, like again, this is May of 2023. I figure since this is evergreen content, I will throw that out there
It may
because
have
I don't
changed
know if
completely.
whenever you listen to this, if Kindle Vella is still a thing. But Vella has like I did an episode on Vella and they had an exclusivity clause about
Mhm.
that. So like you have to stay with them for a little while, not like forever, but for a little while. And I know sometimes that rubs people the wrong way. Some people are all for it, some people aren't. It just depends on what you want for your book and like your author brand, right? So,
Yeah. And I recently changed things up because I had my books just kind of sitting on all these different platforms for years. And when I started getting back into the fiction writing again, I was like, well, I'm really not marketing them in any way on Draft to Digital or Smashwords, they combined now, or Barnes and Noble. So why don't I just give it a try putting them into the Kindle Select program? And it's been great. You get paid by page views. People don't even have to buy your book. They can just read a few pages and you get paid for that. So my sales went from like $25 a month to like $100 a month. And I was like, well, all right then. I'm going to keep doing this for a while. Amazon wins. They always win.
yeah, I mean, you have options, right, as an author, and that is awesome. And speaking of which, I mean, you gave us a little, cookie crumb about that, a little breadcrumb, but so you do have a whole writing persona, right? And you're gonna start like maybe utilizing the book planner. Is that what I understand?
Absolutely, yes. So my first novel that I put out, I used a pen name, Ruth Madison. Ruth is my middle name. And mostly because it's a romance novel. And my mom was like, please do not publish that under the family name. Understandable. So
Fair.
fine. Okay, I have a pen name. I have this persona. And I really did let it drop for a long time. And I'm having complicated feelings about that because, as I said earlier, there's a lot of these people that I used to be on the same level with, who have had massive success in their author careers because they stuck with it and they were consistent and they let themselves continue to work at it over time. Whereas I burned out. I said, I can't write fast enough. I'm never going to be able to make a living at this. And I dropped it. And I feel frustrated with myself for that. But on the other hand, as I come back to it and I pick up this novel idea that I started probably 15 years ago that I love so much, and I think I've learned so much along the way. And I know so much more now about how to publish and how to market books and how to do all of these things that I had no idea how to do all those years ago. So it's a journey, and things happened in the timing that they needed to happen, even though psychologically that can be hard to accept. But yes, I thought, since I have this novel idea that I absolutely love and it's mostly written and I want to share these characters with the world, why not use the book launch planner, launch the book, show behind the scenes, and take everybody along on this journey so that you can actually watch the planner in action and see what it looks like to launch a romance novel. Well, my way of launching one anyway.
Oh, but that is so exciting and so interesting, because I think sometimes, like we were talking about, people can feel overwhelmed, but then seeing it kind of in action, both you have a planner and seeing it executed, I think it'll make it easier for people to be like, I think I can do that, and that generates a lot more interest in plans of like, okay, how do I kind of make my next book launch amazing, like Carolyn did? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think I'm all for working smarter, not harder. And I feel like something like this can really set authors on the right track to finding their audience, finding their niche, and what works best for them.
Yeah, definitely. You do not have to do everything that's in the planner. Like, I made a list of things at the beginning. Here's all the things. Cross out the ones that you just do not want to do. I'm never going to do in-person signings.
Mm.
That was a thing on my radar in the 1990s, and now I don't have to. I'm not going to do it. So, like,
Perfect.
pick and choose what you like, what works for you. I have an aunt who's a novelist as well, and all she does is in-person events. She knows her book is up on Amazon, but she's not really sure how to access it. Like, she's in her 70s. And so she goes to local organizations, bookstores, libraries, but also like history societies, because a lot of her books have local elements and things that happened in that area in certain time periods. So even though they're fiction, she's able to bootstrap that and say, hey, I have this book that I've written where this event that happened in our town happens, and, get people interested that way.
You have to have boundaries, right? We can't do it all of it. So you have to kind of pick and choose what's going to make the biggest impact for you and what you feel most comfortable doing. Right? Like I'm a foster mom. So in-person events probably wouldn't work best for me, just because I need to make sure I'm available for my foster kiddo. So I mainly pick like one or two events a year, if, once I get my book out. But I really want to hit it hard with like podcast interviews and online content, newsletters, stuff like that. That's what I'm actually already starting to plan for in the future. So I want to make sure that those are the ones that I know can fit into my time and fit into my budget and fit into where I am right now currently. Now that may change later on, but for now, that's where I am.
Yeah. Another idea that's been tickling the back of my mind is thinking about having the main book launch planner, but also a supplementary planner, because you really need one for every book that you launch. But you don't necessarily need those foundation pieces, the part that's like, here's how you set up an author website. Well, okay, by the second book, hopefully you've done that, you have that set up. So I was like, maybe some of those pieces could be peeled off into like, okay, here's your next book launch planner, so that each time you're launching, you have those pages to fill in and make a separate new plan each time, put in the dates and all of that.
I love that idea. And I hope you do that, because that would be fantastic to
Well,
add.
okay, I'll do it.
Yeah. And then like maybe even add like later on even more specific things. Cause I mean, if anyone's listening and has questions, I mean, definitely reach out to Carolyn, reach out to me. Maybe I can give her the information of being, my listeners asked this. So maybe add it to the book planner addendum
I want
thing.
it to be the most comprehensive book planner on the planet.
Absolutely.
So, absolutely. Any ideas you have for book marketing or questions you have for book marketing, please let me know so that I can add them in.
And where can they follow your journey of like you putting out and utilizing your own book planner to kind of build up your writer persona and put out your book?
It's all going to be on YouTube. I love sharing on YouTube and just taking people along and how I learn and showing people, oh, I just discovered this yesterday. Here's how you do it. So that's at Financially Free Author. If you put that in YouTube, you'll get me. And there is a book launch planner playlist. So I'm going to be filling that in. There's also a Ruth Madison Ruth Madison author YouTube. So you can sort of see it from both sides because you can watch me executing it if you follow the Ruth Madison stuff. And then you can see behind the scenes of how it was all like planned on the Financially Free Author side.
And you mentioned the addendum, the book launch planner, possibly like a little like companion piece to it. And I know originally in your book launch planner, when you kind of shared some of it with me, you didn't have like necessarily like holiday specific novellas or specific timing of like reads that are very much have a sweet spot, right? Because if it's romance, you're going to have Christmas novellas. I mean, let's just be honest here. There's always Christmas novellas. Now we have like one for every holiday, which I am shocked at, but like, I guess that was going to happen. Yeah, eventually that was going to happen. So good for
and
y'all.
Actually, side note, I must brag for a moment. My friend Annabelle Costa had one of her holiday romance novels turned into a Hallmark movie this past Christmas. Noelle Next Door. That's what Hallmark decided to call it. It's based on a book I think called The Grinch Next Door. It was something about Grinch. She has a few Grinch books, but I was just like, she emailed me like, just in case you're interested. I was like, just in case. Oh my gosh, that's the most amazing thing I've ever heard.
That is incredible. Congrats to her. But yeah, I mean, but yes, I mean, we all know that they're very big if they're not, being made into Hallmark movies. They're still coming out by the boatloads around Christmas. And like I said, now, around usually romance. So it's Valentine's Day is another big one, but they do have one for a bunch of holidays now, different holidays. And
that's something else you do have to plan a few months in advance to hit those just right. And, like if you're going to be pinning on Pinterest, it takes time for it to build up. I'm always thinking in terms of like evergreen everything. So to me, I'm like, next Valentine's Day, it'll be totally there and ready. Like if I missed getting it up in time for it to really make a big splash this Valentine's Day, I'll know that those keywords are in there and people will find it the next time they're searching for that sort of thing. But yes, if you are prepared ahead of time, you can make a big splash with those tie-ins. I will warn that I think in December is the most expensive time to launch a book because of how popular these things are. So there's more competition, especially if you're using like Amazon ads or Facebook ads with your book launch. They're going to be the most expensive they could possibly be in December.
Well, and like I said, I know I work in retail space, but just a little tea, if y'all want to know, is that usually for things like products, any kind of products, like physical products, they're going to launch around October because they want to prep people for that.
They want to give people time to like, this as a gift, make sure you get it.
Exactly. If you want to gift for somebody or for yourself, because they know too that not everyone does exactly around Christmas, right? There are different, holidays in between there, and or you might have a birthday gift coming up, or you want to hit it right as like Black Friday comes around after Thanksgiving. So just a little something to think about if you guys have a holiday novella or looking at Christmas time. It's kind of, you just look at it and you see it in retail. Yeah, you don't think about it. Yeah. And you look if you look at retail a lot of times and you see that, you're like, oh, that's right. Bath and Body Works does put out their Christmas stuff like right after Halloween.
And we complain about it, but it happens for a reason.
But we buy it. I am still guilty of that and I still love it. So it's wonderful. So not for my pocketbook, but wonderful.
There's not a whole lot built into the planner, as you said, for that kind of thing. But I did update the planning your launch dates a little bit with some information just based on your feedback, because I sent you the first draft of it and we were like, well, what about planning your launch around particular dates and holidays? And I was like, I did not think of that at all. So there's a little section there now about it, even though most of my emphasis is on building this as a long-term foundation. And yes, you want to hit a big launch for your momentum, but always be thinking about how this is laying down the pieces for just ongoing sales and steady sales of your books all the time.
You're kind of bringing that point up because that's what I think of it as. This is a good foundation to build all your other stuff that you want to do on top of it. Like this is definitely the groundwork. And now I can do all this other stuff. Like I can add and you can be kind of flexible with anything else that comes along, because I know life and technology can be a little unpredictable.
What you're talking about.
Yes. Oh, yes. Have no clue, right? But do you have any suggestions either in the planner or that you would advise for interrupted launch plans? I've recently seen several authors had to push launch dates back because of family issues, or they didn't feel like it was a product worth putting out quite yet. They really wanted to do some more work on it, some more edits and stuff like that. Or goodness forbid, something goes down, Instagram goes down, Facebook goes down, because it does happen. And you had a marketing beat, a big marketing beat you wanted to do, or it was launch day.
You gotta roll with the punches a little bit. So that does happen. I would say my biggest piece of advice is, yes, go ahead and do the delay, pick a new date, rearrange the things, but be honest with your audience about what's happening. Take them along with you on this journey. This is part of the story. So let them know, oh my gosh, I am so frustrated. This thing happened. Or I really wanted to deliver you the best book I possibly could, and it is simply not ready yet. And so I made this difficult decision to change this and this. And thank you for understanding. Just being really authentic and transparent about what's going on behind the scenes. It's going to make people trust you. It's going to make people root for you. They're going to be like, what an underdog dealing with this technology difficulty or whatever it is.
That is such a good way to go about it. I mean, honesty is the best policy, I feel like, especially with your readers.
And sometimes we feel like we have to be professional and we have to have this veneer and this distance, but reading is such a personal experience. And so I would say forget about being polished and professional and be real.
I love that. And something I've always heard, and I don't know if that was something mentioned in the book necessarily, but something I have always heard as far as marketing is you want to designate one particular place where someone can always find those updates or information. Like you can post it all across social media, but if all else fails, you can always go to the author's, say it's the author's website, or the author will send out a newsletter or something like that saying hey, this happened. So sorry. This is what's happening. And this is how it's going to happen going forward. This is what's going to happen going forward.
Yes. Having your own author website is super important. It is your home on the internet. So that is the base where you can put out that information. And if it filters out to social media, great. But you want to definitely have it on your own website because that's what people are going to search for if they're trying to figure out updates. And it's also a space that you're in charge of. So if suddenly Facebook is like, we think that you did something wrong, so we're going to cut off your access to your entire audience. You can't log into your Facebook group anymore. That can happen. We see that happen every day to people. So you don't want to be building the majority of your audience in a place that you don't have control over. Your author website is yours. Your newsletter list is yours. Those two things go together. And so you definitely need to have that place so that, yeah, it's great if you build a huge Twitter following, but do what you can to bring those people onto your email list because you will not lose access to your email list. And since sales funnels are my heart and soul, I do have sections in the planner about an author website, what it should have, the bare minimum, a little bit about how to get set up. And I partnered with a friend who has a marketing platform, and I developed a author website template that has a sales funnel built into it. It has the email newsletter, like everything is customizable, and it's free with the platform. You just drop it in there and it's $47 a month, which I feel like you can't usually even get a website for that, let alone the email marketing too. So I do have that linked in the book and in the resources, because you got to have an author website. It's so important.
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because that's always something I'd heard. And that's something at least we can control, right? In case like the Zon being cruel
Yes.
and
And
says
I don't
like, oh,
want
I
the
don't like the cover of your book.
technology.
Bye.
Yeah. And I don't want the technology to be what gets in the way of your career. So I wanted to make it as easy as possible for you to have an author website and a newsletter list and understand how to utilize that without like a huge learning curve, or figuring out, okay, I have to compare these 10 different platforms and which one should I use? Like, let's not waste time with that and just get you going, so that that's not the piece that holds you back from having a really robust author career.
Talk about sales funnels. And that's kind of what brought you on my radar, is the fact that you had those sales funnels and all the post-launch plans for your book, how to give it more longevity, because I think that's such a big part of it that a lot of authors may miss, is because they think maybe there's an immediate drop off right after like a day one launch, which just doesn't happen. That's not how sales will usually kind of ebb and flow, right? There's a cadence to like sales, and it's important to continue boosting a book even after the launch. So do you recommend authors plan a post launch at the same time as everything else, or kind of wait to see how well a book sales do before figuring out a post launch plan?
I would say at least a little bit of a post launch plan,
Mm.
because otherwise it's like when you like throw a big party and at the end you have that kind of feeling of letdown and sort of like, oh, it's over. Now what do I do with my life? You don't want to have that feeling. So you want to have a plan so that you don't have that sort of drop off a cliff the day after launch. So I do have some suggestions about ways to kind of recover from the launch period and start building that book into your long-term foundation piece. And I also think that's a great time to start doing ads. So for me,
Mm.
I'm not planning to do ads in the lead up to the launch. I'm planning to take advantage of the momentum of launch to put ads in place and try to keep it going and keep it steady afterwards.
Like as an author, from the sales perspective, from the business side of it, I mean, that's something super important to keep continuing to get those readers, right? To finding that right niche is continuously putting that stuff out there so we can find them and give more long life to our books. For post launch, there's usually promos, kind of like you mentioned, the ads during peak times, or reusing already existing content as practice. Like, for example, in my work life, in my 9 to 5, what is a post launch opportunity that you mentioned in the book? Like you said, Amazon ads. Do you use anything else sometimes?
I think this is also a great time to look into awards. If there's, you could apply for a Writer's Digest Indie Author Award or something like that, because then you can add it to your Amazon listing and show like, I won this award. You can reach out to the press. You can do a new press release. You can reach out to a local radio station and say, I just won this award as a local author, and can I come on and talk about it? So that can give you some other angles to use in promoting yourself.
That's a fantastic idea. One thing too, I would add to that is maybe even look at your local library. Sometimes they do features on like local authors.
Mm-hmm.
Like
And
I know a lot of
local
libraries who will do
bookstores
that.
might have a section just specifically for local authors. And if you have been smart and bought your own ISBN, you can ask your audience to call local bookstores and libraries and request your book. And that's a guerrilla tactic that we've been using for years, which is just a great way to get a book stocked in bookstores, because that's an easier way for an indie author to get their book into a bookstore, is if one of their fans reaches out and asks for it.
Yeah. And I know several local authors, like local romance authors, who will sometimes call like either their local library or their local bookstore to try to see if they can get their books in there for available for the audience or new readers who might be looking for something. And they, like I said, they do some features. I know they have like a whole romance section. Since we talked about romance, they'll have a whole romance section during the month of February. And sometimes they'll do local authors in the mix.
Yeah. And even if that book isn't usually stocked at your bookstore, you can still approach them about doing a signing there and bring your own books, give them a percentage commission on any books that you sell there. You can organize those events. You can talk with your local bookstores about what's a way that we can both win in this scenario.
Once I get my book out there, I may only do like a couple of in-store signings. And if I'm going to do them, I'm definitely going to do them at my either local bookstore or probably at my local library, because I know a lot of those people there because I talk to them quite a bit. And I feel like they would work really closely with me, and they would help me be good advocates, right, for my book. Mm-hmm. So we have talked so much about your amazing book launch planner, and we've talked a little bit about sales funnels as well. So where can listeners find your book and the podcast, and how can they connect with you?
Well, the book launch planner is up on Amazon as of June 13th. So you can look it up. There's not that many on there. You'll recognize the black cover with red glasses on it. But I also have a website, financiallyfreeauthor.com. And that is also my YouTube channel, Financially Free Author. So you can follow along. You can see behind the scenes of the launch. You can look at pages inside the planner. You can follow along as I use my own website template to build my Ruth Madison website. All these things.